Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. I think I'm doing better than you're feeling. This is
Yeah,
another mountain episode of the Father Son Packers podcast.
a mountain episode for you, a sickness episode for me. Apologies for any audio quality issues caused by either one. But anyway, today, Dad, we are here to talk a little bit about a few things. First, Jordan Love got his new contract since we last talked. It's a little bit old news now since it's been a week, but we recorded Friday morning. He got his contract Friday evening, so we'll talk a little bit about what we think about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the second week of training camp, some things we're keeping our eyes on, bigger picture things, some position battles and how those are shaking out. But Dad, I guess before we get into any of that, let me pitch a couple of things. If you like what you heard here today, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out, stats from any of these episodes, articles we find interesting, pieces of Packers other content we find interesting, schedule stuff, injury reports, etc., etc. Pretty much roster moves, anything Packers related you can find there. Once again, it's at FatherSonPacker on Twitter. And then subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Even put all our episodes out on YouTube as well, so check them out there. But Dad, like I said, it's been a little while since we talked. It's been about a week, and a Jordan Love contract got done in the meantime. We've probably already each, talked about this a little bit, like without being on air. But what were your thoughts when it was signed? It's 4-year, $220 million with $55 million a year. That puts him as tied for the highest paid quarterback in the league. $75 million contract signing bonus is the highest signing bonus ever for a quarterback. What did you think about it when it came through? My thought was just like, thank goodness, finally this is done. We can keep going forward.
I think our initial reaction for both of us was, I'm so glad this is done before they start putting on pads. Before the real padded practices start, he is signed and ready to be in the building. And he got in right away, though. I think they, took things easy in the beginning.
Yeah, so...
But in terms of the money, it was like, I would say tied at 55 was probably on the low end of what I expected.
I was definitely expecting something around 57. I was thinking 57, yeah. and then the 4-year structure allows him to, cash out again, possibly is like the idea there. Not have to be on that, lower level, quote unquote. It'll eventually. Thing is with these quarterback
become
contracts,
lower level.
Exactly. They always seem like the most, and then a few more will come past it, and it's just how it is with quarterback contracts. And in terms of the structure of it, like we said, that $75 million signing bonus is a record, $100.8 million guaranteed at signing, and $160.3 million, I think, practically guaranteed.
It's like guaranteed if you get past like the start of the league new year or something for each of those years.
Exactly. And the way that they have it structured out, it seems like so. Cap hits year by year is $20.7 million in 2024, $29.7 million in 2025, $36.1 million in 2026, $44 million in 2027, and then $75.7 million in 2028, and then $31.55 million in a void year in 2029. So pretty much like the idea behind this structure is it's going to let them compete for these next 4 years. In 2028, they're going to have to restructure or extend before 2028. That is a cap hit that is never going to get played on.
Right. This is obviously a 3-year contract. So it's written for, and it's just, as you said, he'll sign, Love will want to sign an extension. This contract has extension written all over it.
Yeah, and assuming everything goes as planned, knock on wood. But the idea there is, so a 3-year extension, essentially, on top of the 1 year that he has. They're keeping those, salary cap hits pretty low. The salary cap hit doesn't go above $40 million until 2027. That's 3 years of a relative amount of cost control that should leave them open to make moves should they need to. They're pretty much opening, essentially, a 3 to 4 year window there with Love at quarterback, and then there is always, the contract will always get done before the last year of the contract. Like a new extension will always be done. You're almost never going to let a player play out that last year of a contract. So the fact that 2028 $70 million cap hit is there it doesn't really matter to me that much. Obviously it locks them into, it locks them into extending him on the end of that or to restructuring at the end of that. Like it limits some of the moves that they can make. But the fact of the matter is if that ends up looking like a bad contract, you've lost anyway. So why are you hedging on losing? Like at this point, they have kind of with this contract structure gone all in on Love being the quarterback of the future, which if you're the Packers, like why wouldn't you? Because this is
Yeah.
what the plan was all along, and it's gone as well as you could hope it could have, like, this far. Like, you draft him, you get 2 years of MVP play from Rodgers, you bring him in, you get a pretty decent, like, 1-and-1 type deal with him last year. He plays better than you probably could have ever hoped for. You go to the playoffs, you win a playoff game. This is going about as well as they could have hoped for them so far, and giving him this record-breaking contract extension is part of, like, oh, this is going very well. Like, this is the situation you would hope you'd be in.
Yeah, and I mean, there are, I think, if for some reasons unexpected things go south, there are some semi-painful outs. I think in places in the contract, probably about as painful as the one for Rodgers, where they had to eat a monster amount of dead cap, but not as bad as $75 million monster. And the contract, these ones are written, and we see it for a lot of the big contracts, and the Packers love to do this, is backload it in a big way to get the average number up to where everybody wants it to be. But that last contract that carries all the weight, last year that carries all the weight, barely has, any reality, really, because there'll be a new contract that'll be extended for another 4 years, for 300 and something million by then, or maybe more, maybe 400 million by then.
Yeah, obviously, knock on wood that everything goes according to plan up until then. But it's not surprising that they structured it this way. It makes sense to me. Anything else on the Love extension that you really want to talk about? I just figure we should mention it here. There's not really a whole lot, in my opinion, to add on. It's just good that they got this done before the first padded practice, early in camp. I was getting a little worried that it was going to drag for a few weeks and kind of, it's not ruin, but slow down the momentum of this team that I think everyone is so excited about, right?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something that I think is very important. That it essentially opens a 4-year window in the current contract, where players can be signed and extended in a way to keep the core of the team together.
Yeah,
we have a multi-year window, and I think they probably say, like, we are close right now. We want a multi-year Super Bowl window.
Yeah, and it makes sense that, like, you're going to have a lot of young players coming up for contract extension soon, so that makes sense. They're going to need some money available. Keep in mind also, they still have like 40 plus million dead, like, hit on their books this year. So if you're like, oh, how could they, like, play with Love on, like, these cap numbers? It's like, really, if you think about that dead cap as, like, part of the quarterback cap, they're kind of doing that now.
The quarterback room last year was like, what, 55 million last year.
Exactly. So, like, with the amount of dead cap they're dealing with the way they've structured it, I don't think that this contract's going to be prohibitive at all to them competing these next 4 years. The only thing that really limits them in is, like, they're tying themselves to Jordan Love. But after what you saw last season, after, what you've seen the last 4 years in terms of how he's developed through practice, and after what you've seen off the field from him, I think there's no reason not to do this contract. But anyway, Dad, any last things you want to add there, or should we talk a little bit about a couple of roster moves? So, okay, a couple of roster moves. Packers have made some additions and subtractions since the last time that we talked. 3 new additions: cornerback Don Callis, cornerback L.J. Smith, and then long snapper Peter Bowden is back, Dad. The long snapper battle is back on. They had previously cut him for Jacob Eason, but they've brought him back now. And corresponding moves where they cut kicker James Turner. So the kicker competition is down to just 2 people now, just Greg Joseph and Anders Carlson. And then they also cut fullback Henry Pearson, so there's no longer a fullback on the roster. And then they also cut corner Zion Gilbert. So some moves there, Dad. Any thoughts? I thought it was a little interesting to bringing in 2 corners, but with Carrington Valentine out, maybe that's why.
Maybe that's
any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I thought the most surprising move of camp, during camp, was the cutting of Peter Bowden. I mean, both of us were thinking he might win the job. And they just cut. So we're glad to see him back.
Yep, a Badger. Always good to have, a Badger back on the team. And then they have been dealing with, like I mentioned, some injuries. Carrington Valentine has a hamstring injury right now that they said they're going to be cautious with. So it sounds like he's going to maybe miss some extended time, unfortunately. Obviously, we know how hamstrings went last year for the Packers. And Don Callis, who I just mentioned, also has a hamstring injury already. So clearly they're going to be extra cautious with those this year after both Watson and Stokes were slowed by them and re-injured them last year. However, it did get a few players back. Marshawn Lloyd was back out there after dealing with a hip injury, although Edgerrin Cooper, other rookie second-round linebacker, has a hip injury now, and he's out.
Hip or groin, depending on who you listen to.
Yeah, Matt LaFleur had it as a groin, and then the official report had it as a hip, so who knows?
And then Josh Jacobs is banged up as well.
Josh Jacobs
So
has a
he
groin
said
injury.
himself that he could have played if it was a game.
Exactly. I was going to say during his locker room availability, he said, like, if it's a game I was playing, he's like, I wanted to play, but they're just making me take it easy, which is fine. So it sounds like his isn't too major. Did have a few players, Josh Myers out again for personal reasons. Obviously, hope everything is okay with him, but that's a few different times he's taken personal reasons. Hopefully, these are good, positive personal days he's taking off.
Yeah, we haven't heard enough to know. So
yeah, but hopefully everything's okay with him.
It's nothing bad.
And then, but yeah, so those have been the major injuries. Obviously, Tucker Kraft is still out as well with a pec, although Matt LaFleur says he's getting close. So hopefully he'll be back soon.
And also begging to play.
Yeah, he's been begging to play every single day. But, the Packers are dealing with a little bit of an injury bug here. It definitely seems like that, huh?
Yeah. And it seems like we got a few after that, really hot day, perhaps.
Yeah, that really hot day with a 2 hour plus practice. Not totally surprising, all things considered. And then, but yeah, so hopefully the Packers will be able to get back healthy soon enough. Obviously, also some other players on injury report. Donovan Jennings, offensive lineman, has a knee injury. Desmond Alexander has a lower leg injury. He's been out for a little while now. Keyshawn Banks has a knee injury as well. He's been out, or actually, his might be a groin, actually. He's been out for a little bit. And then those have been the major injuries so far. Not major injuries, nothing like super. Probably Carrington Valentine's the one that's going to end up taking the longest, but anyway, with all of that said, Dad, let's actually get into talking about, training camp from maybe, a topper level view, a higher level view in terms of some trends we've noticed, some roster battles we've noticed rather at certain positions, how the depth at certain positions is shaking out. What is the first thing that you wanted to talk about through 2 weeks of training camp?
Oh, okay, I got to go first. I got to change my spot in the in our outline. So for me, I've been looking at what's happening the last few days with, is there a wide receiver one? Who's wide receiver one? Which wide receiver is looking great? So start like this, a lot of this training camp so far, especially the first part of this week 2, Romeo Doubs has been looking amazing, apparently, from a lot of people. Jair Alexander called him the second best wide receiver in the league behind Devontae Adams after practice session number 7 on Tuesday, saying he remembers Doubs coming in as a rookie and not catching a single pass against him, and now he's catching 50-50 balls. And he complimented Doubs on his attention to detail and catching extra balls after practice.
Well, not only that, but he said after they had that set of 1v1s, he was saying no, give me another rep. Give me another rep. He going.
He wanted to even the score because he felt like he got beat too many times, and he's like, no, this cannot stand.
Yeah, but and they didn't give it to him. But yeah, so Doubs won the day. But yeah, it's definitely been a really nice week for him. It's interesting because I think the real cutoff point is remember at the end of the regular season where it was oh, Doubs is clearly, the fourth receiver, and that's fine. He brings a valuable skill set to the offense, but he should probably be behind, Watson, Reed, and Wicks. And then the playoffs, he just completely took over, was clearly the number one receiver on the team in both the Cowboys game and the Niners game. He was the best receiver for the Packers. And so now I feel like it almost leaves it in a bit of limbo.
He was the best receiver on the field for either team, I think, in both those games.
Yeah, it was either him or what. Not actually, in real life. I'm not going to argue he's better than Ayuk or better than Debo.
The game he had.
I would say,
in both of those games.
Him or Jawan Jennings. Jawan Jennings gave us some trouble.
Jawan Jennings was kind of giving us trouble. He's driving me crazy. Why is this guy, torching us?
Yeah, this is
maybe the Niners and Cowboys fans are probably feeling the same way.
I know. I know that. Yeah, exactly. Especially Cowboys fans. But no, so yeah, I think you could definitely argue Doubs, if he takes another leap this year and if he can continue that form from the playoffs, there's no reason he can't be the wide receiver one for the team, right?
It could happen. I mean, he seems to be able to, have a connection with Love when it's needed. So yeah, you mentioned the one-on-one. So he basically, I think, beat Jair 3 out of 3 on those 1v1s on Tuesday. But one of the throws from Love was off target, so he only ended up catching 2 of them. And he got another catch versus Jair in one-on-ones on Wednesday per Paul Brettel.
Yeah.
And then Doubs also has
him. Sorry, go ahead if you had more on Doubs.
Yeah. Yeah, and he also caught a touchdown in red zone drills on Tuesday for Andy Herman and Paul Brettel, and has at least one other touchdown from Love in team drills this week. So I saw a list of touchdown leaders for training camp practices across the league.
Across the league?
How's that?
Across the league is crazy.
This wasn't the
across
Packers.
The league
this is
absurd.
across the league.
It's like
Talk about
they're not running
desperate.
the same number of plays.
Talk about desperate for football information.
I watched all of the Hall of Fame game yesterday, and
Speaking
even
of desperate
I
for football,
am not tracking touchdowns in training camp. That is absurd behavior. But I was going to say, it's not just Dobbs, though. Dobbs is having a really good camp. Wicks is having a really good camp, too.
Oh,
he's dominating also. Are you going to save that for later? Okay.
Well, so it's part of my whole wide receiver one. I'm just like rambling on forever here, and taking all this over.
You would never, yeah.
So in I guess it was practices, maybe 6 and 7 was Dobbs, and 7 and 8 and 9 were Wicks. So it was Wicks' times to shine the last two practices. On Wednesday, Wicks got open in the end zone for a TD in the 2-minute drill with the ones, and then also caught the 2-point conversion on the same.
Same play apparently. It was exactly the same look.
Apparently ran the same play, got wide open in the back of the end zone again, same way. And then on Thursday, the last practice in the 2-minute drill, Wicks caught a 13-yarder over the middle from Love. I think he laid it over the linebacker in front of the safeties. And then he caught a 27-yarder down the sideline, which apparently is one of the best throws Love has made in all of camp. And then Wicks also got open near the goal line on another play. Yet another play we got wide open, forcing Bullard to grab him for a DPI to stop the TD.
On fourth down, which is a very smart play because there were only 4 seconds left on the clock. Right. So it's a brilliant play.
It worked because on the next play, Wicks caught it again, but Jair, together with, I forget who, 2 of them were able to keep Wicks out of the end zone on that last play as time expired. Or did it I heard it was did it really expire? Should have been another second left. But anyway, so Wicks was getting open all the time the last couple of days of practice.
Yeah, I mean, this receiver room is just so exciting. The other things that I'm keeping an eye on there is, sneakily, I do think that Grant DuBose might have passed Malik Heath overall so far in this training camp. That's something I'm keeping my eye on for that 6th receiver spot.
Can I go in my section talking about 3 different receivers? Because DuBose is also looking good. And apparently what I saw is he was training, I think in Florida, with Reed and Watson. I saw that somewhere, a quote from DuBose. That
it would have been Reed and Wicks, probably, right? In Florida, or was it? Because I know Reed and Wicks were staying together. Watson is from Florida. He's from Tampa.
He's from
Reed
Florida,
and Wicks were living together in the same house this summer, which is why I asked.
I may have the third one wrong. I'm not, but he was working on his releases. Oh, I think you're right. It was Wicks because I thought about it when he's talking about working on his releases. Like, I was getting tips from Wicks. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're right. Maybe it was Reed and Wicks. I was maybe thrown off by the.
And obviously, it's going to come down to for those guys. It's going to come down to who can contribute most on special teams. But I do think that DuBose, Malik Heath conversation there. I was kind of penciling in or almost in pen writing. It's like, and Malik Heath will be the 6th guy. He showed enough last year, but DuBose was a 7th round pick while Malik Heath was an undrafted free agent. So clearly, prospect wise, they were higher on DuBose. He was kind of just set back last year by a back injury, never really got to participate in camp very much. He was kind of put behind the 8 ball. He never really had a chance.
Last year, he basically, he missed most of training camp, didn't really get anything out of it. And so it became kind of a lost year with that start.
Yeah, which is why I would not be surprised at all if he ends up passing Heath. But anyway, anything else on the receivers, or should I go into my first thing that I'm taking away from training camp so far?
I guess I can give you a turn now.
All right, my first thing that I am keeping an eye on right now in training camp is a lot less interesting, but it is the kicking competition. Like I mentioned, James Turner was cut since the last time we recorded, so we're down to 2 kickers. And it was really, neck and neck until just this Thursday, August 1st, when Greg Joseph pulled ahead. And I don't know about you, Dad, but when they brought in Greg Joseph, over the offseason, I was like, okay, so it's going to be Carlson again, so we're not bringing any real competition in. But I
felt like it was like there was no difference between Joseph and Carlson. It was like you brought in a guy who's basically the same in terms of
you brought in a guy who's the same but with less upside, you don't know if can improve. But so far through training camp, and this is per Andy Herman, on Thursday, Joseph went 7 of 7, including a make from 58, and Carlson went 4 of 7 on that day. So hopefully he can bounce back. But that puts them right now at Joseph 29 of 31 on kicks so far this training camp, and Carlson so far 25 of 31 over the course of camp. So a decent lead right now for Joseph. Now, keep in mind for Carlson, I actually went back and looked to last year, per Andy Herman also. At this point last year, through 31 kicks, Carlson was 20 of 31. So 25 of 31 is a massive improvement.
I knew it wasn't good last year, but it's even worse than I remember.
No, 20 of 31 was so much. I was like, oh, he was probably around here last year. I was like, he's probably around 25. 20 of 31 last year. So he is clearly...
And they brought in nobody. 20 of 31, and they brought in nobody.
So he has clearly made some strides from last year to this year. He's clearly, shown some improvement. So that's great for him. But, it does seem like Greg Joseph has taken the lead as of this past week. Now, obviously, there's a ton of time in camp left. I imagine they're going to keep both of these guys for a while. But the fact that Joseph has, established himself as like real competition, I think, has actually caused me to go and look a little bit closer into his year last year. And how good was he actually? What are his actual limitations? And so I did a bit of a deep dive into him. And all these numbers are per PFF. And so looking at, league averages, you looked at the PFF numbers, looked at his numbers via PFF. And I just wanted to share some things because I actually came out of this deep dive being a little bit higher on him than I had previously been. So last year, he was 94.7% from extra point, and the league average was 95.33. So he was,
that's basically zero difference.
Around average at extra points, and there's this knock on him that he misses a lot of extra points, but he's around league average, maybe a little bit below. Obviously, you maybe prefer him to be above that, but around league average, not terrible. From 0 to 39 last year, he made every single kick, 100% from 0 to 39. Now, the league average last year was 96%, which is also very high. So he was better than league average, but most kickers were very good there. But it's still something that is, that's a feather in his cap right there. Now, from 40 to 49, he was just 3 of 6. And that is, 50%. And league average is 76.5%. For what it's worth, 2 of those 3 misses were in Lambeau. So that's not ideal, but one of them was blocked, to be fair. However, so that 40 to 49 isn't great. And then he was 57% from 50 plus. The league average was 66.14%. He missed from 57 at Chicago, 50 versus San Francisco inside, and 54 versus New Orleans inside. So it definitely seems like he could probably improve a little bit at the distance kicks. So, and that's been the knock on him is, does he have enough leg? Like, is that going to be an issue? And obviously that definitely, by the stats, from 40 to 49, he definitely could have been better, although, did have a block in there. 50 plus, not great with, missing from 50 flat and from 54. You'd hope a kicker would make those, especially a kicker who's kicking inside of a dome. But I did, a lot of people have also talked about, oh, he doesn't have the leg to kick outdoors. Like he's a dome kicker. He played for the Vikings. Like they're in the side of dome, like half the games of the year. But I went and wanted to look at his splits, outdoors versus indoors, because I wanted to see if that was true last year. So interestingly enough, he was actually 2 of 4 from 50 plus indoors and 2 of 3 from 50 plus outdoors. So about even indoor outdoor for 50 plus kicks. And then from 40 to 49, he was 3 of 4 indoors and 0 of 2 outdoors. Now, both of those misses were in Lambeau, and one of them was blocked. So, you give a little accident forgiveness. Maybe it's more like 0 of 1. But, there is
just not that many attempts from the 40s.
Yeah, there's just not many attempts for him.
But maybe that's what the analytics say. Maybe should have so many attempts from 40s and 50s.
Yeah, but so my main point is the leg was actually held up decently outdoors. It held up better than I expected outdoors. His numbers kicking outdoors were similar enough to his numbers kicking indoors, because I'm going to count that 40 to 49 outdoors as 0 of 1. If you get blocked, it is what it is. Obviously, you wish he had made it, but it's a very small sample size there. And then my other question was, okay, does his leg fade as the year goes on? Is that an issue? And so I looked at his, his averages over a rolling 4-week window throughout the season. And if anything, he actually hit a lull in the middle of the season and then didn't miss a kick over his last 4 weeks, went 5 of 5. So his leg seems to at least hold up throughout the year. Now, the fact that he's making 58 yarders in practice with no wind, that's also really exciting. And so I actually came into it a little bit less worried about, the indoor-outdoor stuff, a little bit less worried about his leg wearing down over the season. And obviously the numbers from 40 to 49 and 50 plus are not amazing and they're below average, definitely when you look at them. But we're dealing with small sample sizes, and so I would say I came away from this deep dive and looking into this kick competition that, if Greg Joseph ends up as the kicker, I'll feel okay about it. Dad, what are your thoughts hearing all these numbers?
Well, just hearing what's coming from training camp, it does seem like it's really in a groove right now. Apparently, it's just like right down the middle almost all the time. And the numbers, I was a little surprised by how few 40-yard attempt there were, but the 50s are actually fine indoors and outdoors. It was actually a little better from 50 plus outdoors than he was indoors. So it's not like he can't make it from 50 when you get outside.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I can't tell from this is what time of year these different outdoors ones were.
Yeah, that's. But
you do have information on the that he actually got better at the end of the year, which was kind of the opposite of what Carlson was doing. He got worse as the year went on.
Exactly, and I looked at those last 5 games. The only one that can be like you were mentioning time of year. The only one that I would say was really a possibility of a rough weather game was at Cincinnati. At the end of the year, that was the only one in that last 5 weeks. Where he was outdoors in a late, I would say winter game. The rest of them were all like pretty, fair weather conditions, but he made his kicks in that game. So there is at least that. But anyway, so kicking competition wise, my main takeaway is just that Greg Joseph has taken the lead and we shouldn't be as scared of that. I think he can be an okay passable kicker, obviously knock on wood. But if Joseph takes the lead, I feel a little better about it now than I did maybe back when he was signed.
If Joseph keeps kicking like this throughout training camp and preseason, then he's doing really well. His field goal conversion attempt is like not that far below the league extra point attempt last year. He's like 93% versus the league 95% for extra points. Yeah, so his field goal percentage in camp has been incredible.
Exactly. And better that his numbers were better than Carlson's last year. And I think, maybe he doesn't have as much upside as Carlson does, but sometimes it's better to have a little bit more steadiness there. But Dad, anyway, anything else there? Or do you want to move on to your next thing that you're keeping an eye on camp so far?
Sure, I'll go to my next one. And it's kind of short, but I've been looking at Isaiah McDuffie or looking at reports about Isaiah McDuffie. I don't actually have eyeballs in person there, but he has been playing with the ones in base defense, I think, every day of camp so far. He has been the starter with the ones, been up first, next to with Quay Walker and Eric Wilson.
It's been mostly the three of them, mostly the 3 vets. Not much of the rookies so far, and obviously with Cooper injured, that maybe that's part of it. But
yeah, and then in nickel, we were seeing a little bit more. I felt like in the beginning of camp of Cooper at nickel rather than McDuffie, but now like Wednesday and Thursday, he's started in nickel next to Walker, and some of that is I think this last day looks like it would have been the injury to Cooper. I don't remember if he was injured on Tuesday or Wednesday, whether he missed.
He was injured Wednesday. He was injured Wednesday, and then
Okay, so the McDuffie starting at nickel and Wednesday wasn't because Cooper was already hurt. So he's been getting more and more time at nickel as well, and he's also been getting a lot of I think he likes the style, just go aggressively after the ball. He's been making a lot of tackles for loss in the backfield, apparently in the run game on multiple days.
Where he's gonna, I do think where he's gonna shine is the run game. I have question marks in the passing game though.
I was looking through one of the days, the play by plays. These weren't one-on-ones. Maybe these were red zone drills. I can't remember. I don't know what type of drills these were, but he did get beat, not surprisingly, by Wicks a couple of times.
Why is he guarding Wicks? Different question. Very different question. Why is he lined up on him? Who
basically,
knows?
it was described as Wicks, got open and caught a pass with McDuffie in coverage.
I would hope that Wicks would beat McDuffie in coverage. No offense to McDuffie, but
yeah. So the one thing we've worried about him in the past is his coverage, but he shouldn't be covering receivers so much, more like tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. But he does, come for tackles with with violence. I think he said that himself. There's a quote from him. I am coming to make the play with
violence
intent or whatever.
I was going to say with bad intentions.
Bad intentions. I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but something like that.
He looks really good when he's able to, come downhill, split blocks, like not have to take people on as much, shoot
He does a
downhill.
good job of that too. When you have like the play flowing across, let's say, from left to right, he has on a running play. He's shown an knack in games as well to split the basically pulling blockers and get between them and into the backfield to bring down the ball carrier.
Yeah, and he's a much better tackler than you'd expect him to be at his size and arm length. Like, he's a pretty sure tackler. And I think the other thing is he's the most familiar with Hafley because he played a year under him already at Boston College. So maybe that gives him a bit of a leg up as well in that spot.
Yeah, I was expecting, and there have been good things said about Cooper as well in practice and in the OTAs. So I thought that Cooper would have already gotten ahead of him in the depth chart or at least ahead of, or that he would. That would be Cooper would be one of the three in base, and it would be Cooper and Walker in Nicholas. What I was expecting, but maybe it'll still happen. But so far, McDuffie has mostly looked, has been holding him off and keeping a tight grip on that spot.
And obviously, like the caveat that there's not actual tackling. They've only had pads on like 4 of the days so far, 5 of the days. Like, just keep in mind that there is the caveat there. They're not actually bringing anyone on the ground. Like, I've seen multiple also where like Tyron Hopper had a few different like run stops in the backfield.
Yep.
And I'm like, only because he didn't actually have to tackle them. When he actually has to tackle them, then I will be a little more interested. But right now you're just having to like touch them pretty much. And
I think you'll get a good read of like Hopper, McDuffie, and hopefully Cooper's better by then when the preseason games starts. I think they're going to play a lot of snaps, the three of them.
Yeah, same with Lloyd, I think, as well. I think those are the ones that are going to be easiest to keep an eye on.
I don't even have it on my list, but like Lloyd's run, 50-yarder.
Yeah, 50-yarder. Or 4-yarder.
Or maybe 450, depending on who thinks
give or take.
Whether tackle could be made or not.
Yeah, I was going to say, whether or not that tackle actually was going to get made.
450, they're about the same.
Exactly, round to the nearest 50. But anyway, anything else on the McDuffie and the linebacker spot that you wanted to touch on, or should I move on to my next one?
Why don't you move on to your next one?
So my next one is unfortunately not as much of a positive. I am getting a little bit scared by the offensive line depth. A little bit.
A little? A little?
Yeah. So keep in mind that maybe this is colored a little bit by the fact that on Thursday, Josh Myers was taking a personal day. Elton Jenkins was taking a vet rest day. And then Zach Tom is still not practicing with the team yet. He's still not practicing in team periods yet, I should say. He is doing individual drills, but he's still rehabbing that torn pec he had. They're hopefully that he'll be back after family night this weekend. But we'll see. But keep in mind that it might be colored a little bit by that. But looking back to last year, the Packers pretty much had to go 8 deep along the offensive line, including Bakhtiari. So you had the starting offensive line for the week 1, and then you had to go down to Walker and then Ryan and Nyman. So they had 8 players play significant numbers of snaps along the offensive line. And honestly, they stayed pretty healthy along the O-line last year. Knock on wood, they can this year too. But the depth along the offensive line will be tested. There's no two ways about it. It's tested on every single team in the NFL. Every team wishes they were deeper along the offensive line. But for the Packers, so let's just say they need to go 8 deep again this year. So that's Rasheed Walker at left tackle, Elton Jenkins at left guard, Josh Myers at center, Jordan Morgan at right guard, and Zach Tom at right tackle. Let's say they have their preferred starting 5 to start the year. Then moving on, moving on to the next. So the next man down would probably be either Andre Dillard, who has not looked very good in camp so far, has actually looked really poor to the point where he is no longer the backup tackle. They've pretty much had Kadeem Telford do that. Then Kadeem Telford, who has apparently looked pretty good in training camp, but I mean, he's a second-year undrafted free agent, so maybe he's all right, but he has limitations. He's a massive mountain of a man, but he's not exactly going to get out moving in space. Then you have Sean Ryan, so that's at 8 deep. Sean Ryan, I don't trust Sean Ryan right now. I would feel unsettled if he was a heavy snap player at that guard spot. You keep moving down. Caleb Jones still isn't participating in team drills yet, and overall has really struggled to stay healthy in Green Bay so far. Jacob Monk, their 5th-round pick, got some reps with the ones yesterday, but struggled snapping, multiple snap exchange mishaps. Travis Glover, who they also drafted, we haven't heard his name much at all. Both of their undrafted free agent linemen that they tried to sign that we were excited about. One of them, Trente Jones, was forced to retire, unfortunately. And then the other, Donovan Jennings, has had multiple knee injuries so far in camp and hasn't really practiced much at all. And then we're seeing Royce Newman first team reps at left guard in 2024. And we were thinking Royce Newman might not even make the team, and he might be their third best guy off the bench right now, because he's probably better than Dillard right now, but you wouldn't want him playing tackle. I don't know what. So right now the depth is feeling really tenuous, because besides that, it's Lecitus Smith, Luke Tenuta. Like, those are the next guys down on the list, and I don't think they feel super strong with those. I wouldn't be surprised to see some movement along the offensive line in terms of some signings for some depth spots, because right now the next three guys up are Dillard, Sean Ryan, Kadeem Telfort, Royce Newman, and I don't necessarily feel great about any of those. And I would say I feel bad about multiple of those.
I would put him in that order, because Dillard's like near the bottom of the whole list.
Yeah, because Dillard, except for the one thing they signed Dillard. They signed Dillard for the minimum. He was 38th in sack rate and pressure rate allowed last year amongst 38 tackles. He was dead last. So he was the worst pass protecting tackle in the league last year, and the Titans couldn't run the ball. So I don't feel great about him. I feel okay about Kadeem Telfort. I don't know. We don't know what he is.
What do you think about, I think it was Stenovich who said that, well, Dillard's a lot better on the left side than he is on the right side. Do you buy it?
I will take his word for it. I don't want to find out. I'll take your word for it, my guy. I don't want to see it. That's the thing, is like, maybe, but he played like he played left tackle last year, and that was when he was the worst. So like, he's better. I was going to ask if you
knew the snaps from last year, so it was left. But I would put like probably the best of their options of who's the next up is Sean Ryan. And after him
or Telfort
is Kadeem Telfort. Telfort is ahead of Dillard. Maybe it's Telfort and then Ryan. That Telfort's the number one on the tackle, and Ryan's the number one interior guy.
That's the thing, is, and then Newman.
And I don't even know who the next guy is. Maybe Royce Newman.
So the next three guys up that are probably going to need to take real snaps are a second-year undrafted free agent who has never played before, Kadeem Telfort. He's probably their best one. That's saying something. Is their best one. A third-year, third-round pick who has not been able to really see the field. He rotated in. He's an okay run blocker, Sean Ryan, but he can't move his feet in pass protection. And then Royce Newman. We know what Royce Newman is. We didn't think Royce Newman was going to make the team, but he's going to be their third guy off the bench, it seems like, right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far we don't know enough, and apparently they're not playing them. The way they're playing them doesn't suggest confidence in Jacob Monk or Travis Glover. We're hoping those guys will be able to contribute more this year. Maybe as we get further into training camp, we'll see a little bit that makes them a little bit less scary.
I mean, we'll see. I'm a little nervous.
Right now, it's a little scary, because apparently we have the best D-line in the history of the NFL based on some of the offensive line combinations we've thrown out there.
Yeah, apparently. Or it's another Jake Hansen, Royce Newman scenario. And somehow 2 years later, we're back to Royce Newman is the number 2 or 3 guy off the bench, because the rest of these guys either can't get on the field or are struggling. And so that's something that I'm keeping my eye on, is this offensive line depth. I am a little concerned so far through 2 weeks of training camp. Now, obviously, maybe, hopefully Caleb Jones can come back and show us a little something and stay on the field. Hopefully Luke Tenuta can start showing us something. Hopefully Donovan Jennings can get back on the field, but it's a lot of hope right now, and more question marks than hope, I would say, even along this offensive line, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, though the one thing I will say about what's going on, that Jordan Morgan seems to have locked down right guard.
That is true. Jordan Morgan, and
he just keeps starting at right guard. Doesn't matter what else is going on. Right guard, he's right guard.
Yeah, and they mentioned, they see him like playing guard and then playing tackle in a pinch this year. So it seems like he is going to stay at right guard, and apparently he's been doing well at right guard. He's been winning his 1v1s in the versus Wyatt. It's actually mostly been him versus Wyatt, and he's been getting the better of him, so that's good. And they haven't really been rotating that right guard spot much anymore. So we'll see. We'll see if he gets any, snaps at tackle as camp goes on, or if they're just going to be like, hey, we just want to get you as ready at right guard as possible, which I don't think either is necessarily the right or wrong way to do it, but I'm keeping my eye on. But Dad, anything else along that offensive line that are you just as scared as I am, just to close it out? Because I am a little worried with this depth right now.
I was hoping that they were going to get more offensive linemen from this year's draft that they felt they could play in a pinch, and we haven't seen that yet.
And they did say, coming out of the draft that they saw Jacob Monk as an interior swing guy. I don't think I've seen him get any reps at anything except for center so far.
Well, that would solve the snapping problem he's apparently been having if they put him in a guard.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully. But anyway, anything else you want to touch on there, Dad, or do you want to go to your next one?
We could go into my next one now.
Your next and final one. What's your last thing you got?
Yeah, so looking at slot corner and what's going on there, we had talked about multiple times now. I'd probably bring it up every time. But apparently Nixon is looking better than ever in coverage. That was, I think, a quote I saw from Andy Herman. But they have been mixing other people in. They've had both Kalen King and then Corey Ballantyne when he came off the injured list, whatever it was, pup. I've been working out in the slot corner group with Keyshawn. From Paul Brettel, it sounds like both King and Ballantyne have been getting some slot reps. It looked like Ballantyne was up first with the ones when Nixon stepped out. So he seems to be a little ahead of Kalen King in the slot. And Ballantyne, a quote from Ballantyne, I think it came via Paul Brettel, was, "I feel like it's good to be well-rounded," talking about why he likes doing it. "Having me in there to do some blitzes and also fit in the run game fit me well. I'm a little bit bigger of a body, so I can do that well. I don't have a problem tackling. I think it's been a good fit so far, just learning the defense, learning my role, where I'm supposed to fit in that position, and going back and forth between the two still."
Yeah.
And then, so he seems to be embracing it, and he's been getting chances. And then one thing, I think with people injured or sitting out, there were times when both Ballantyne and King were on the field at the same time. And in that scenario, King was in the slot and Ballantyne was on the outside. So that would suggest a little bit more of kind of zeroing in King on the slot. Though one thing I'm not sure of. So King has had some good reps. He's been getting a little bit of buzz around camp. He had some good reps against Toure in one-on-ones, and he even got an interception off of Love on Sunday out of zone coverage. So I think it was Love's second practice.
A pick six, not just
a pick six.
Interception.
Pick six. Everybody's like, he could have gone to the house. And when I was looking at King's interview afterwards, he said he was in zone, cover 2, according to his own interview, and kind of just read the play, read where he was, and stepped in and grabbed it.
Yeah. He said he felt quick game coming, and so he got his eyes on Love, and then he was like, "Well, I'm going right there." I was going to say though. Go ahead. Oh, do
you have something more about King? And apparently Bullard has also been getting some reps in the slot.
That was interesting because Bullard got reps in the slot, and they moved Keyshawn Nixon to outside corner. That was weird. But I was going to say for Ballantyne.
And Keyshawn, is that when Keyshawn promptly gave up the touchdown to Watson?
I can't remember, but I was going to say for Ballantyne, last year they were playing him a little bit when it was the Ballantyne show. They were playing Ballantyne on first and second down because they liked his run support more than Carrington Valentine's, and then they were bringing Ballantyne in on third down, if I remember correctly. So it kind of makes sense that they would want Ballantyne, with a B as in boy, to maybe get some reps inside in the slot because they like him in terms of his size, like he said, and his tackling ability.
Yeah, and so he's getting chances, and so that's good. At least I would like to see that they're giving multiple players chances to see how it all works here. And maybe they're thinking King is a future slot corner.
Yeah, the way that whole secondary shakes out is going to be really interesting because right now it definitely seems like 3 spots, maybe 4 spots are set in stone. Obviously, this is assuming health, knock on wood. Jair Alexander is going to be your starting corner 1, and Xavier McKinney is going to be your starting safety 1. It seems already in camp that Eric Stokes has locked down corner 2.
He has grabbed that job. It seems like he's run away with it even before Ballantyne got hurt.
Yeah.
And now Valentine's going to miss out who knows how long.
A few weeks probably at least. So it seems like Eric Stokes is locked in that corner 2. I would say it seems like Keyshawn Nixon is 95% of the way there to locking in that slot corner spot. Yes. Don't you think that's fair? And
so got a huge lead for the slot corner spot. Yes.
The question to me is, and obviously corner 3 is Carrington Valentine, I think. So the question to me is, who is safety 2 and who is slot corner 2? So safety 2 is a big rotation right now between Bullard, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Evan Williams, and all of them have really had their days in camp so far.
Everybody's looking good as safety 2. And they're doing the whole rock and roll that McKinney makes the call in some of those defensive sets about who rotates back and who goes forward to try to disguise some of the coverages. When they're doing like a single high, they'll switch who's single high and who's
pick which one he wants to be, which makes sense to me. Let the guy leading the defense decide. Makes sense to me. But anyway, so that's in that safety 2 spot. They've all had their days. Although I will say it seems like there's been fewer interceptions since Sean Clifford is not the quarterback 1 anymore. But so that's very interesting to me. All 3 of them have gotten praise at one point or another from Matt LaFleur. And then that second slot spot seems like a battle between Ballantyne and also Kalen King, and then maybe Javon Bullard too. So I'm very interested to see who's going to end up as that slot 2 and who is going to end up as that safety 2.
Yeah, we have I feel like a lot more depth in the secondary, all across the secondary this year than last year.
I mean, that's what happens when you hit on a 7th rounder and an UDFA, and then you make some signings and you sign, and then you draft. Like, we haven't even talked about Katana Oladapo yet at all. I don't know if he's back in teams yet.
I don't know if he was playing any of the teams, but he has been practicing now. Just starting, yeah. I think he's had 2 practices now. Yeah,
yeah. Same day as he came back. Same day as Lloyd, I think. So actually 3 then. I think 3 back.
Is it 3 back now?
Yeah, because Lloyd's been in teams twice and regular once, I think, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so anything else you wanted to say there about that slot corner spot? Anything in the secondary? Because I do think the secondary, just as a whole, is something I'm keeping my eye on.
As a whole, it's like a very
there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent back there.
We have so much more talent than we had last year, where we were basically, getting some duct tape and twine to try to hold it together as people were missing time and getting hurt. And
honestly, it wasn't that bad.
We didn't invest, and it held up better than we expected.
I was going to say, if the secondary was really not that bad last year, all things considered, with Jair missing several weeks, Stokes being out almost the whole year, safeties essentially being guys you kind of signed off the street / just
the fact that we spent large portions of the season with Ballantyne and Ballantyne as our top 2 corners, and then okay. we had Owens and Ford and
Savage
as our top 3 safeties.
Yeah, like that, and it did not go terribly, which is kind of shocking to me. But anyway, I have one more thing to talk about from this training camp, if I am allowed to press on, and that is the depth of the defensive line, but this time in a positive way. So the depth of the O-line, negative, depth of the D-line, positive. Now keep in mind, these might be related. They might be inversely related to one another, and perhaps we have another situation where the D-line is looking dominant because the O-line is struggling, but
or perhaps they have a situation where our O-line is really good, but the defensive front is just, all time, all world.
Sure. I guess anything is possible, but
I am not partaking in anything unusual. I'm just throwing opinions out there.
But anyway, so far, Rashawn Gary has looked dominant in training camp so far. Although part of that is going against Dillard for about a week, and I think he's been a little bit quieter since Dillard has not been in that number 1 spot. A really nice set of of practices from second year guys, rather. Lucas Van Ness has flashed a lot during this training camp so far. Carl Brooks has flashed several times during this training camp so far. Colby Wooden's been getting snaps. Go ahead.
For Brooks and LVN, and when I've heard more this week than week 1, I would say for both of them.
And Colby Wooden's gotten some snaps with the first team, which is really exciting. TJ Slayton has apparently been a very pleasant surprise. This quote's from Matt LaFleur via Paul Brettel. Quote, I think TJ's had an outstanding camp. He really has. I think just, quite frankly, he's surprised us in some ways. He's just been his ability to get off the ball and wreck double teams, whatever it may be. I think he's done a really nice job. So I'm really excited to see how he's progressed. So it sounds like he's been even better than maybe they expected, been a better scheme fit than maybe they expected. With a guy that big, you don't expect him to be shooting gaps, but he's more athletic than I think he gets credit for. And then Devontae Wyatt has flashed several times, also per Matt LaFleur. This one's via Ryan Wood. Quote, he's come in probably the best shape he's ever been in. His effort running between the whistles has been as good as anybody. So I do expect him to take a leap this year. I think what we do is beneficial to his skill set, and I'm excited for him, end quote. And then even Jonathan Ford has apparently had his best camp so far, as a pro. So it seems like they're having a lot of bodies here along this defensive line flash so far in camp. Now, obviously, could just be because the offensive line depth is really struggling, but I think I'm really excited about what the depth from this D-line has shown so far.
Yeah, and Ford is he's flashing in pass rush. He's getting into the backfield. You hear, rather than just standing up and trying to plug up the run
Yeah.
gaps.
Previously, the biggest reports you'd see about Jonathan Ford are Jonathan Ford looking huge out there. Jonathan Ford, really big man, and then you'd never hear his name again. But he's actually making some plays out there.
Yeah. So, and the question is, do they have more defensive front players than they have slots for? Like the number of defensive tackles, how many can they keep?
I mean, I think Ford is on the outside looking in right now. I don't know,
because
I guess we'll see.
They're 5 ahead of him very clearly. Though Wooden was also getting some reps at
snaps
end.
at edge.
So as edge, and well, speaking of edge, like you already have we are 4 that we're really good, comfortable with, and Brenton Cox has been looking good too.
I was gonna say Brenton Cox as a 5th guy feels really great as a 5th guy, especially So because and that was the thing. The one thing about Wooden, taking those snaps at edge, obviously it shows his versatility and adds to his value in terms of him being able to provide depth at multiple positions. Keep in mind though, Preston and Rashawn Gary were out that day, so it could just be an instance of like, hey, we need a body here. Come on, like just take some snaps at edge. Maybe they don't actually love him at edge, but anything you can show you can do is an extra chance of making the team, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing I try to remember and not like get too worked up about. They may be putting people in where they're struggling because they need to find out, can they do it or not?
Yeah,
and the only way to do that is to throw them into the fire.
Yeah,
so they can know where can we put this guy in during a game and where can't we?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like you talk about the defensive tackle groups being so deep. I mean, so far it's been obviously Kenny Clark, and then Slayton has gotten probably the most days starting next to him. He's apparently been, I would say maybe arguably the biggest surprise at camp so far has been Slayton kind of being in that number 2 spot. Obviously it's going to be a heavy rotation, but then you have Brooks and Wyatt, who I think both, like everyone should be really excited about in this new defense. I think you got Wooden 5th, and then on the edge, on the defensive end, you got Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, LVN, Eningbare, and Cox. Like, I mean, this defensive line, it's loaded with depth. I think the question mark comes like, can Rashawn Gary make that leap from like a top 15, borderline top 10 edge rusher to like a top 5 guy? Because that's the kind of leap I think that is hardest to make, but would have the biggest impact on this team now.
Yeah, if Gary plays during the year like he has in the first week of camp,
if he did that, he's winning Defensive Player of the Year. Like,
yeah, that may if he could play like a top 5 edge rusher with all the other depth we seem to have, I think we have finally a chance to get like top 8, top 5 defense. If he plays like that.
I mean, if he just plays the whole season how he did through the first half of the season, like the ceiling for this defense just explodes.
Can I ask for a whole season like he had against the game he had against the Lions?
Just 3 sacks a game, yeah.
Just
definitely.
3 sacks a game?
3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles a game. Easy peasy. Yeah, he'll get right on that, I'm sure.
2 thumbs, anyway. Way up.
Anything else along the defensive line you wanted to touch on, or should we wrap up here?
I think we wrapped up. Yeah, because we even got into the edge rushers a little bit and how much depth they have. I think it's got 10 guys for 4 spots.
4 spots, yeah. Which is like
they got 10 guys we both really like for 4 spots.
Yeah. It's a good problem to have. But anyway, this has been the Father Son Packers podcast. If there's anything from training camp we didn't touch on that you think we should take a look at, let us know in the comments. Let us know on Twitter at Father Son Packer. Like we said, we tweet out whenever there are new episodes out. So just, shout out to us and be like, hey, you didn't talk about this. What are your thoughts about that? We'll get right back to you. Comment on YouTube. We put all our episodes out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Give us a review. Give us 5 stars. Let us know what you like. Let us know what we can work on. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll still be doing an episode every single week for the rest of the off season. And then we'll be doing 2 a week during the season. Family night is, today as you're listening to this, but it's tomorrow. It's August 3rd, and it's actually going to be streamed on Packers.com. So no more throwing your location. No more trying to be like, hey, I am in Wisconsin, I promise. But they're actually going to stream that on Packers.com, which is a really awesome development. So check that out. Anyway, thank you so much. Right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.